Hey, everybody, and welcome to Mega Shift Today. I'm Rob Kleiman, editor of Mega Shift, and I'm joined here with Kevin Clancy, who I'm really excited to bring on and have talk about HR tech, and all the things going on in this space of HR. And so, Kevin Clancy, really excited to have you. How are you doing today?
Yeah, likewise, Rob. Really excited to be here. Excited to kind of bring a different perspective. The trends we're seeing within people teams, recruiting, talent acquisition, as it's like every area of tech shifting quickly.
Absolutely. So just to set the stage a bit, so Clancy is currently a senior manager with a background in people ops. He's currently working at a financial technology company that provides small businesses flexibility in collecting payments, things like that. You've been around the horn. I was following you on a map. I think maybe you'd been in DC, Richmond area, Austin, Texas, uh, Los Angeles, um, and kind of all over and within these different really exciting markets. So just kind of sharing a little bit about what you do now with your background in people ops. You've been in the HR space over your entire career. 4 years over at another real estate tech company. So you kind of seen a lot of different facets of this in a lot of different markets. So yeah, maybe just could you set the stage a little bit about what you do and kind of how you got into this space?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to share a little bit about my background with you. I've been in the people HR space. The tech companies did a nice rebrand for us HR folks probably a decade ago or so, and calling us the people team, which feels a little bit nicer. But currently, as you mentioned, a senior manager for people ops and talent for a financial technology company. And my focus throughout my career has kind of shifted. I have kind of a varied background where I haven't just specialized in one lane of people ops or human resources. So I have a good bit of my experience on the recruiting and talent acquisition side, but also the HR business partner, people operations, how our HR technologies fit and work together to impact the employee experience. In my current role, which I'm fairly new to, it's more focused on the employee experience. I am actually shifted away from recruiting and talent acquisition, have a counterpart focused on that. But my role kind of picks up on day one, and even leading up to day one. What does that experience like for a new hire coming into an organization? What does onboarding look like? How do we get the most out of our onboarding experience to like welcome employees, but also help them ramp up, effectively and quickly in their position to understand what they need to know, what that timeline should look like, what resources they need, both just from an employer perspective. When are you getting paid? How are you getting paid? What are your benefits like? What your expectations when you start at any new company, to how are we training you to be effective in your role quickly? And then the whole employee life cycle, as we would say in people ops, is what does that whole experience look like throughout someone's tenure at a company, and how do we make that positive? How do we retain individuals? What does productivity and performance look like? How do we, correct that back to where we want to see it? And all through a lens of how can we do this better? How can we be an attractive employer to top talent? And how do we keep them here and develop them once they're in our organization and ecosystem? So I love that stuff. That's why I do what I do. And prior to my current role, I have been more focused on recruiting and employee relations and uh, all the fun stuff underneath the people umbrella. Happy to go deeper into some of that prior experience as well, especially on the recruiting side, which I think is probably my kind of strong suit or expertise area. It's what I've done the most of. But I started my career not in tech, and migrated uh, to technology as I started to see some of the trends of how human resources were functioning and what I valued in how I wanted to operate as an HR professional a little bit more squarely happening in the tech and startup space, especially 10, 15 years ago when that started to emerge out in the world. And there was good and bad to that, but I think we'll get into to more of that as we chat further. Um, I studied organizational psychology before discovering industrial and organizational psychology. It's a little bit of a niche field, but you kind of focus on both sides of the employee experience, and that could be kind of the what we call the hard side, the nuts and bolts of the HR side, and that can be payroll, benefits, things that you need to do well, but maybe aren't the biggest value add. And then the other side, the soft side, employee morale, employee motivation, organizational culture. How do we identify top talent? How do we develop it? So organizational development as well, change management. And I actually studied psychology as an undergrad, and I was always interested in how people think, what motivates people to do what they do, and started going down different paths of psychology and learning more about it. Thought I wanted to maybe be a therapist or a chemical dependency counselor, and did some internships in that space. It's heavy, to be expected. It's heavy, absolutely necessary, and appreciate the folks in those professions. But I just found it a little bit too heavy to take home with me on a day-to-day basis. And nonetheless, I stumbled upon industrial and organizational psychology, and it's kind of this merge of business and group psychology or social psychology theories of applying it to any organizational setting, but often cases a business setting. And I found that to be really interesting and practical and a little bit lighter than, you know, uh, licensed professional counseling or therapy. And so a lot of people say HR business partners, HR leaders can kind of function as the therapist at a company. And so
Right.
in some ways, still bringing that with me to what I do
Yeah.
today, 15 years later.
That's a great story and a background, and really appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the therapist aspect, or dealing with different types of conversations aspects, whether it's about comp or morale or a particular performance, or growing the organization, or adopting new tools, right? So there's just like a lot of problem solving that it sounds like you and folks in your field have to bring, and a lot of like systems thinking, and does this application tracking system like sync with this thing, and so a lot of systems. But on that notion of crucial conversations, and bringing that, your thought partners with hiring managers, your business partner with leaders and VPs, and all of that. So I think where a good place to be to start today is kind of like, in your view, knowing all that, and the HR field, having seen a lot of different sides of it, like what do you think makes the working in tech personal, and how do businesses kind of stay empathetic? And of course the caveat here is this is your one opinion, but you've seen it from a lot of different sides. So kind of what are some of your observations? Really keen to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I mentioned a bit earlier of like me starting to drift towards technology and startup companies probably 10 years ago, I was living in Austin, Texas, and started to see the tech scene bubble up there, 2010 to 2015, and you saw a lot of these what are now tech giants, Netflixes and Metas of the world, 20 years ago now, starting to focus more on the holistic employee. How do we motivate employees? At that point in time, it was like, why don't we give them everything they need at the office? So snacks and food and laundry and daycare, so you stay at work, potentially a little bit longer and are a little bit more productive. But I think still with that came a lot of good trends of how can we support the employee? How can we think about them uh, from a more human perspective of just a productivity metric? But you know, how can we support their personal lives better? How can we support their mental health, especially in the past 10 years? at the workplace, because life doesn't stop at work, and we can now work, from anywhere whenever we want. And that's an awesomely powerful thing, but it can also be an intrusive, overwhelming thing at times to kind of become a burden where you can't unplug and you can't refresh, and that can start to tank productivity after a while as well, where it's not sustainable. And so start to see, you know companies in the tech space focus on being a mission driven, values driven organization, and really say, this is what we stand for. If you stand for that as well and have these values in your personal life and want to carry them into your professional life, come be a part of this organization. And I still want to work there personally. I want to work at those organizations that are saying, we value you, here's what is important to us. It is, being accountable. It is uh, constantly pushing the envelope and driving innovation. I want to be at those places too. Um, and always having a mission that isn't necessarily ever done, right? And how do those values drive us towards that mission? I want to believe that, I play a part in making that a reality, where the values are actually kind of informing the behaviors of the business and our different teams across the business. But that's not always the case either, right? Like, especially uh, in 2015, when I was first kind of breaking in to startups and tech, it was, ping pong table and beanbag, and era of startups and kegs on the wall, and it's super fun. But like, I think it almost over time kind of took away from the actual employee experience and what we were there to do, and being productive and growing ourselves, and maybe the focus shifted a little bit too far away from the matter at hand. But I think that's kind of corrected itself over time. And so I think now we're seeing like a focus on efficiencies and what we can do to kind of carve out extra time to, again, be more hands-on with the human side of being at an employer, and how do we make that a good positive experience. And but that's really fluffy. The reality is there's a business need at the end of the day. And so even within HR, it's kind of like balancing that of like, how how great of an employee experience and friendly can I be with employees when the business might push me towards a direction where I have to have hard conversations with employees about performance, or the past few years in tech in particular, the waves of layoffs and reductions in force, and having to sit in the seat that is communicating that to employees that honestly are oftentimes really solid performers and good people, but the nature of business and finance is saying, hey, we have to go make these changes and reduce headcount. And I think what prepares us well for those critical conversations as HR professionals, but also managers and leaders across the business, oftentimes they have to have those hard conversations as well, whether it's, a layoff, or it is just a hard performance conversation, is just being authentic, being respectful, being mutually respectful, and compassionate. Like, I think a lot of people increasingly have been impacted by these reductions, including myself. And I think that should grow empathy amongst HR professionals and business leaders, whether they've been impacted themselves recently or previously or not. Is just saying, hey, it's a human on the other side of this call. How can I do this in a considerate and respectful way? Because those are not fun moments that come with the job, whether again you're an HR person or a people manager. Is part of the job is having to deliver hard information and hard news. And how do I do that well, and not in a way that's just inhumane or not disrespectful, but just inconsiderate of the impact that this is going to have after we wrap up this call. This person has to go, inform a partner or a family member, and their world has kind of been upended within a 30-minute Zoom call. So how do we do that in a way that doesn't just end there, but even if someone is exiting an organization, how do I still show up and support them after that because they've shown up for a business or a company for, whether it's been a few months or, a few years, and a lot of people, beyond decades that they've been with a company. How do I show up and support them after the fact as well?
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I really appreciate you kind of sharing the both sides of it there, and keeping the human in human resources, or people and people teams. Like, we're dealing with people trying to bring their best to work, showing up at work, and it's really like admirable to navigate those waters from both sides. And so I think it's a great segue. Uh, kind of looking at the market, as you mentioned, some people are currently seeking, and some hiring managers have to really change their search strategy to kind of meet the AI moment. So, zooming out, like what would be some advice that you had to job seekers right now and hiring managers right now, about kind of meeting in the middle, and making it a happy medium?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question because I think it's uh, influencing both sides of the table, right? Like both the candidate search approach and how people are locating jobs, preparing for interviews, creating resumes and refining those. And also from the talent acquisition and employer side, we have um, greater infusion of like AI features within existing technologies that we've used in this space for 5, 10 plus years, whether that's LinkedIn Recruiter or our HRIS systems are now all being embedded with AI assets and agents, and I think that's super powerful and uh, is gaining a lot of efficiencies within especially our recruiting teams, like whether that's with regards to like screening applications or actually during the interview. Like that's been one of the biggest time savings for me, is just like a recruiter when I've been in the seat doing interviews is no, like the basic AI technologies that we're seeing, but they're strong already, is like just note-taking apps. I can't tell you how many hours a week that has saved me as a recruiter, and just improved the interview experience, I hope, for candidates, as well as like I am not just over here typing away on a keyboard while someone else is on the other side trying to talk to me, wondering like, are they actually paying attention to me? Are they replying to a Slack? I'm actually typing notes, but nonetheless, it allows me to focus on the conversation with that candidate that much more, and not worry about typing up my notes, or did I remember this? Did I remember the comp expectations correctly? Because I'm doing 4 back-to-back-to-back-to-back interviews, and then maybe I'm not having really complete notes because hours later I'm typing that up. And so it sounds really, really basic and foundational, but it is carving out that bandwidth to again focus more on the conversation with each candidate and show up for that last candidate interview of the day. Maybe it's interview 8 or 12 or 15 for a recruiter on a given day. um, but I'm showing up for that final candidate with as much energy and focus as I was earlier in the day, which wasn't often the case. I can tell you, when I had 12 phone screens, I felt bad for that final candidate because they weren't getting, my full bandwidth and attention. Um, and so, also from the candidate side, where they're finding job postings is shifting pretty quickly. Like the results from AI search or conversational search is different from traditional search now. And I know you've focused on that in prior conversations of like search rankings and how uh, these trends are flipping things around, and it's happening in job search as well. Of maybe results are pulling in from Reddit or a different job board that wasn't maybe considered like the bread and butter of a LinkedIn or an Indeed. And so I think from both sides, again, you have to be aware of that. Like from the employer side, where do I do I post jobs the same places I was posting jobs a year ago? And I knew I would get really strong candidate quality results and a really good inbound pipeline of candidates. Now it's, a different platform that I might want to spend more like job advertising money on to reach the right candidate pool. And so that's shifting pretty quickly. So just like staying informed of where your candidates are coming from on the employer side and saying, hey, do I need to kind of shift around and double down on this other job board that, you know, 3 years ago I never thought might have been the strongest one, but now it might be. Um, and then from the candidate side, and the employer side, I would say just be use it to improve how you appear as a candidate, like use it to create the foundation or kind of like the base sauce of what you're trying to accomplish in your job search, but do not over leverage it or fully rely on it entirely because you're starting to see some of the pitfalls and downsides of it like across all parts of an organization is like the AI slop and like, okay, I can tell this wasn't fully created by you as an employee. Like maybe you just churned this out and sent it out without taking the time to double check and say like, is this actually the work product I want to send out? And same thing with a resume. Like don't just rely on an AI generated resume and then start firing it off to all of these different companies without bringing a human lens to it. And same goes with the employer side as well. Is like don't over leverage AI just yet. Use it to improve the impact of what you're doing for the organization. I would also implore uh, organizations not to over leverage AI too quickly or too soon, just because if we're using it without understanding what it's looking for and just kind of an AI filter for resume screening, right? Like I think we're still so early on that we don't know exactly what it's looking for, and does it have the same trained eye as a seasoned recruiter would to kind of look at some of the nuances of someone's experience to say like actually like I think this person could have the right background and the right experience. Are we missing out on qualified candidates and strong talent by over relying on it, or just using it for the first stage of an interview process to do like a, an AI led interview process that might kind of miss some things before we refine things further. And so I think where it's really powerful right now um, is kind of on the training and education side of recruiters, the note taking aspect, like I mentioned, kind of saving bandwidth, the coordination side of scheduling and coordinating the interview process. Like again, another area where it's like kind of foundational and not super exciting, but is gaining a lot of efficiencies within the rest of uh, what I can do in a given day in a given week and carving out more time for strategic projects and thoughts of like, okay, now I'm spending less time on uh, doing these rote tasks. I have more time to develop a more impactful interviewer training, or even some of these platforms themselves are leveraging AI to kind of monitor interview effectiveness between certain interviewers and like, okay, this we're identifying this one manager is a really strong interviewer that's leading to strong hires. What is that interviewer doing and kind of uh, identifying behaviors, questions that they're utilizing and leveraging to have better hiring outcomes and adding better talent to their team. What can we learn from that interviewer? And it's spitting out interviewer training that is actually really, really good and strong in some instances to say, okay, this other employee that just got promoted to being a manager and they're now interviewing, but they haven't done a lot of it before. And it can now, train those interviewers to be more effective interviewers based on the behaviors of others. So I think that's really interesting. But again, don't solely rely on it when as a recruiter, we're becoming better at spotting what is maybe an AI application or AI dominated application, whether that's from the resume, how they're filling out questions on an application where it's just a little bit of gobbledygook and it's like this doesn't make sense, or it's just filling it filling it out as nil and or NA, and it's like that's not great either when I'm asking you a question about what value at the company you must relate to and why it's important to you, right? And so
Wow. Yeah.
there are still some gaps there where it's like helping help leverage it as a starting point to get you moving a little bit quicker and enhance what you're doing with your job search, but don't bring the human element of yourself and what you bring to the table just
Right.
as much along the way. Yeah.
Yeah. 100% agree. I think like everything's good in moderation, and
Right.
figuring out how to like embed this into the flow and the organizations and the candidate flow and the interview flow. So yeah, I wanted to ask, again, you've like encountered a lot of different types of scenarios, a lot of different kind of conversations. Is there one kind of fun or memorable people moment that kind of sticks out in your career so far that you would want to share as a little anecdote and that kind of reflects the broader, the life of somebody working in this space? Anything stick out?
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of the tea and juicy stuff on the HR team, right? And um, I mean, some of the memorable ones, I wouldn't call them fun. The reality is like life doesn't stop when you go to work, and so it can become uh, heavy and dark, but it can also become I'm helping an employee, I'm helping them with a personal matter, or I'm helping them professionally and grow a lot. And so, like, a positive, memorable experience is just like the impact that you have on someone's career is not me driving their growth by any means directly, but you know, ha- what, how have I helped in someone's career journey? And like now I've kind of dating myself, but like one of my first experiences within tech was like hiring interns for our company and seeing someone who I hired as a finance intern 10 years ago now operating as a CFO at like a fintech company. And that's like a really cool, positive, memorable experience of like, hey, I can tell myself at the very least, like I had some influence or impact on someone where I was like, oh, I think this kid at that point in time was like super sharp and they're leveraging technology in a way even at that point in time that was like foreign to me as an HR person. And now seeing them grow a decade into to being in the C-suite is really cool. There's dark memorable moments involving like happy hours and a dog in a balcony, and as a pet owner I won't use that as my most memorable experience, but you see it all, like I mean, again, good, bad, and indifferent, whether that is stuff you can laugh about in the moment, maybe not, but 6 months later, 10 years later, when you're like, man, I can't believe people do some of the things they do at work. When it's like whether it's relationships at work, you'd be surprised where those happen, when they happen, at what levels they happen at. Um, and so I'm kind of glad that we've shifted away from those early startup days of like just throwing money at parties and President's Club trips to Mexico, because I've had to have a lot of follow-up conversations with employees returning from those trips where it's like you can't, it turns out you can't hook up with your direct report. You knew that, we knew that, and so it does lead to a lot of difficult conversations or people maybe going to the kegs a little bit too early in the day and finding drugs in the bathroom because that kept them smiling and dialing on the the sales floor. And so you see a lot, and like I can laugh about those now and say they're funny stories, but they impact people in different ways. And I think the part I love about doing what I do is genuinely being able to help people, and whether that is in their job, in their broader career, or personally, right? Like the HR team, the people team is the team you go to when an employee is going through something. Maybe they have a partner who was just diagnosed with cancer, or they just lost a family member and they need to understand what bereavement policy looks like and how we can support them, or they're going through their own mental health challenges. And so how can I support them? What resources do we have? What benefits do we have to kind of like wrap our arms around that employee as a person and say like, here's what we can do. And it's not always something that you can like fully support that employee with. Like not every company has the mental health benefits, but nonetheless, like how can I help you get through this hard time to still be able to show up for work, or maybe right now you need to step away from work and it's not the most important thing. How can we support you to where we can get you back to being a full, like engaged and dedicated employee again? And sometimes that is saying, hey, like let's step away from things for a little bit and come back. So that was a little bit of a meandering story there, but like you do get the good and the bad that comes with HR. Is like you get some spicy stuff that you can kind of say like, "Whew, can't believe that person tried to get away with that," or the positive like human side of the HR team is helping people kind of get past some big roadblocks and speed bumps in their personal life to still show up.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that what you shared is really valuable in that, right, like just the people team, the HR team kind of is holding up the organization. Sometimes they're holding up the founder and they're holding up the president or all the C-suite, or trickles down to managers, the interns. Everybody kind of has to come to the same place to figure out what the company can do for them in these times of promotion, but as well as in times of need or open ambiguity, things like that. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Um,
Yeah.
as we look at the shifts happening in this space, I know we covered a lot of them. Kind of AI's starting to embed itself in a lot of the different HR functions that you talked about. So we covered a lot of ground there. Is there anything maybe that we haven't discussed that you'd like to share with the audience, either about yourself or about what you're seeing in the HR space, people ops space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think an area where I'm seeing an impact that we haven't touched on is just like around training and learning and development for employees. I myself have not worked at like giant tech companies. It's typically been earlier stage companies, anywhere between 30 employees as the first HR hire up to you know 750 to 1,000 employees. You're getting some decent size and resourcing then, but when you have these leaner people teams, which oftentimes is the case, people ops and HR teams are not generating revenue, so we're going to operate more leanly, oftentimes, especially in earlier stage companies. Um, so like I'm expected to do a lot, and I like learning and development. It's not my expertise, but I oftentimes just didn't have bandwidth to help develop kind of tailored training programs, or professional development plans and mentorship programs. And there's a lot of these really cool learning and development L&D platforms that are doing that for us, and in a really effective way of saying like, what is this employee profile? What does the most recent performance review say in terms of areas that they could develop and strengthen? And then in having those inputs to create a tailored learning and development plan for each employee, instead of just taking kind of a broad standardized or kind of canned training approach. And so I think that could be really powerful, especially for earlier stage companies, again, where it's like, I'm just trying to get people hired and into the seat and make sure that we're paying them on time and in compliance and giving them benefits, I would love to spend time on training and development and leadership programs, but a lot of these cool new HR platforms, particularly in learning and development, are starting to do that for us, which I think could be really powerful to retaining employees because when you're being grown and fed, you're more likely to stay where you're at. And hopefully we're actually growing that employee and we're seeing increases in productivity and performance, and it's kind of this like this upward spiral and this flywheel of talent development and helping them locate mentors across the organization in the same platforms and more regular feedback instead of the annual performance review, which you know most people don't love, including your HR team members don't always love doing those just from an operational perspective, but kind of this more constant drip of performance feedback in these platforms so that we can kind of be more iterative in how we're developing talent rather than waiting 12 months to look back and then look forward and not touching those goals that you set at the 2024 performance review until the 2025 performance review potentially. So I think that's really powerful, and I think it's just kind of the first inning of the 9 inning game here. So we'll see where it goes next.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really insightful because as we mentioned, AI is all part of the mix now. It's like if employees are shipping work product faster and they're interacting differently, and the meetings are streamlined and the notes are there, and it's like why shouldn't there be a tighter feedback loop, right? That's like helping employees kind of check in and stay moored during this like really disruptive time. And at Megashift we are documenting disruption, so really excited to kind of have your perspective from the HR side about how this is playing out. It's a period of rapid change. So also, as you mentioned, we got a full 9 innings ahead. This is just the first inning of this new era, and kind of managing this on a lot of different fronts. So really thrilled to have you on today, Kevin Clancy. Thanks so much for joining Megashift.
Yeah, likewise, Rob. Has been super fun to chat with you and kind of bring maybe a little bit of a different perspective and different flavor to the mega.
Well, thanks everybody for watching or listening, and we'll catch you next time on Megashift. You heard it from Kevin Clancy, a senior manager of people ops in the financial tech space. So see you next time. Thank you.
Cheers.